UK Prime Minister Liz Truss has shown us the folly of tax cuts for the wealthy. But is National Leader Christopher Luxon listening? Dita, you begin this week's Flipside by talking about how many times you've been schooled on your failed ideology, particularly in the NBR comments section, probably. Why don't you give us a lesson on why tax cuts won't work in New Zealand as well, though?
I have been schooled many times, Hamish. I'm surprised you didn't call me Comrade De Boni, which some others have. I just think, a lot of the world is saying it, but basically looking at the UK and looking at the situation with inflation, the cost of living crisis, global uncertainty, a recession forecast. We in New Zealand are also looking at all those headwinds, perhaps at a slightly lower level, but we're still looking at them. And nobody, I think very, very few people think tax cuts for the very wealthy are a good idea in those circumstances. I would argue they're never a good idea because I think that, an equitable tax take is just fundamentally better for society. But in this particular circumstance, I think it's very bad. And I don't know why Christopher Luxon is sort of sticking to this idea that he has that he would like to introduce them. He's sort of suggesting it's a way of fighting inflation, which is something I don't really understand because trickle-down economics doesn't work. And even if it did, it would be inflationary in its effect. So
Does he also make the argument along the lines of attracting foreign workers and skills as well?
he does. He is saying that particularly high-paid professionals would choose New Zealand over other areas if they had a better tax rate. I think New Zealand's tax rate is quite low by international comparisons anyhow, and people come here because they like the country that is engendered by a strong social safety net. And they come here because they like the work-life balance. So there are other things New Zealand can offer. I'm not saying they do offer it well always and universally, but I think in terms of doctors and high-paid surgeons and engineers, they have a pretty good trade-off here, I think, all going well.
So how does this all tie into the Aotearoa Hotel Industry Conference and exhibition that you're at last week, was it? Bit of moaning
Yes.
going on about the government?
Quite a lot of moaning going on about the government. As is usual in business circles, they don't like red tape. They don't like the COVID response. Obviously, it hit tourism very hard, and there's no question of that. Small operators certainly have done it very tough, but these guys had record bookings, had record room rates as they came out. In many places in the data they were showing, they were superseding 2019 data and rates. So they seem to be coming back quicker than expected, and that's what they were saying. A record amount of hotel investment had happened last year because I suppose people had stockpiled money, maybe domestically, without so many places to spend it. And so, yeah, it seemed like a very healthy, well-attended conference with lots of abundance to talk about and lots of good things, positivity. But yet there was just this such a negative scene running through it about the COVID response, which, some people argue actually created the conditions in which they have been able to bounce back quicker than expected.
Do you think, they can't completely turn away from business, but it must be pretty tiring for Labor engaging with business sometimes when, as you say, everything seems to be going all right for some sectors and yet there's still just criticisms abound for the government?
I think so. I think if I was in government, I'd be concentrating on the small business sector. I think the big end of town, they are pretty fundamentally opposed to a Labor government, although some are very progressive as well and do very good things in terms of green SEG and that kind of thing. ESG. But yeah, small operators, getting them through is the important thing, which they have been given money through COVID. So some of them have survived from that. But yeah, I think in general, the business audience is very hard to win over for Jacinda Ardern, and they will be responsible for voting her out, I'm sure, in the next election.
So do you reckon if Truss goes in the next couple of weeks, Luxon might reverse his stance, or not quite that simple?
I don't think so. The funny thing about this morning, and you will have read this as well, is that Jeremy Hunt, took away some of those tax cuts for the wealthy, but in other cases, he made things a lot harder for people. For example, the energy cap is only going to be applied for 6 months rather than 2 years. So it's not just like we're reversing it, and we're doing a free for all. There's still going to be spending cuts and all sorts of things. It's still the Conservative mantra. It's still something that Luxon will be looking at, I'm sure. So I think the ideological war goes on over tax cuts.
Dita, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Hamish.